Are you ready for I don't want to say controversial, but it's kind of a controversial topic. You ready for a controversial question?
Gregory, I can't handle controversy.
So got it. I'll take that as a yes. The question is by Bebop Sing-a-Song. Was Paul just telling women in the particular church that he wrote that letter to, 2 Timothy, that they should be silent and not teach? I think other passages show Paul was commending women for the work they did. So what are your thoughts on women shutting up and not saying anything in church?
Well, I think there's two passages being conflated here. I think Correct. One is about 1 Timothy 2, which is the not teach one. And then the second one could be 1 Corinthians.
It is.
The women in all the churches of the saints, women should remain silent. I can't remember if the Timothy passage says the part about silence or not. That's why it makes me.
Timothy also says silent and not teach.
Okay. Okay, I couldn't remember. I know 1 Corinthians also involves silence, and so they kind of come together. The other passage is Ephesians. It's Ephesians 5. The main passages that have to do with this usually kind of people take them together. Carmen and I have had a whole discussion. We did a whole episode here on the channel. I do not permit a woman to teach. What's going on there? Can women teach? And I also participated in a debate. I helped host a debate at Gordon Conwell years ago called, and you can YouTube this one because it's not on our channel. It's on the Gordon Conwell YouTube channel, but it's called Can Women Lead Men? So if you just type in Gordon Conwell, Can Women Lead Men? That was a full-on debate that we had where we invited a woman who was a complementarian and a man who was an egalitarian, and we had them debate cordially in-house. My take on it is the epistles are always contextual. And the question is, how far outside of that epistle's context does what is being said apply? And some things in epistles apply universally, and some things in epistles apply very specifically. So 4 times in his letters, Paul will say, greet one another with a holy kiss. I've never been in a church where they kiss each other, ever. Even in the most literal churches, they've never greeted me with a kiss. So that lets me know all churches recognize that there's contextual limits to what any of the epistles are teaching. Now, does that mean that you can just dismiss it all as contextual rather than universal? No, of course not. But I think care and caution need to be exercised. And I think the rule of thumb is when reading the epistles, particularly occasional epistles like the pastorals, 1 Timothy, prime example, that's a personal correspondence from one person to another about a particular congregation. It doesn't mean that he can't be giving universal teaching. It just means we got to know from other parts of Scripture that that's what he's doing before we rush into saying that's what he's doing. And in that case, I don't think that's what he's doing. I think whatever interpretation you take of 1 Timothy, and there are multiple out there, it has to fit with the overall thrust of Scripture and what we see in both Testaments, Old and New Testament. Yep. So I am not convinced that the prohibition on women teaching that Paul gave to Timothy was ever intended to apply to all women everywhere. I've heard the arguments. Mike Winger's done 14-hour podcasts where probably, I don't know, some crazy amount on it.
No, you're right. It's about 14 hours.
Yeah. And I just saw a meme or a quote. Somebody posted a Vodi Bakum saying the Bible doesn't allow women to teach men in church or preach, period, or something like, or it's that simple, I think is what he said it. And I'm like, well, it's actually not. That's misleading to say it that way. I've heard those arguments. I don't find them convincing. So no, I think there are good reasons for saying Paul is speaking about a very specific thing going on in the churches to whom he's writing. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try to make that case on an open mat. I will say, check out the video where Carmen Imes and I talk about it, because that's a long video where we walk through it. And then if you still aren't convinced, okay, so be it. Just make sure you're not only listening to what one side or the other has to say, and that you're listening to both.
You think there's any value to quickly reading the two scriptures? I have them pulled up. If you think there's any value to that,
I mean, you can pull them up. I won't really give much comment on them, but
I'll pull them up. I have them up here. One of them is 1 Timothy 2, verse 11. A woman, this is from the CSB version, a woman is to learn quietly with full submission. Verse 12, I do not allow a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. Instead, she is to remain quiet. That's 1 Timothy 2. And then the other one that you were talking about as well is 1 Corinthians 14, verse 34. End of 33 and also verse 34. As in all the churches of the saints, women should be silent in churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but they are to submit themselves. So those are the two scriptures that, taken out of context, and like if you just read those two sentences, it sounds like it's cut and dry. But as JM said, there's more context to it than just those two sentences. And that I've never thought of it, what you said with the greet each other with a holy kiss. But that's a great example. Like I also, in almost 60 years of going to church, have never been greeted by a holy kiss anywhere in any church, Caribbean, US, Netherlands, you name it. So either we're going to take the whole thing literally and, apply it broadly, or we're going to be honest and say there's obviously some context going on here. So controversial question answered. Well done, sir.
Well, let me, I'm tempted to, there are two quick things that I could point out that might be worth pointing out, but about doing a screen share.
Yeah, do it.
Let me, is this sharing?
Yep.
Okay. You can see my accordance, right?
It's super small, but yes, we can.
Yeah. That's why this will take just 1 second. So let me get rid of this. I'll pull up.
You're getting it live. So for the question that you were asking about a deep dive, here's a real good, quick way of seeing JM do an actual deep dive in one specific, like whatever he's about to show right now. But this is one of the tools that you would use for doing a deep dive.
So let me just make one point. I have on this side of the screen, on the left-hand side. Oh, let me turn on my.
I'm actually going to get rid of
my cursor. Oh no, I'm just sharing the window, so my cursor won't show up. All right, never mind. The arrow pointer won't show up. So 1 Corinthians 14, let me just make 2 points, and then you can take these and chew on them as you want. But in 1 Corinthians 14, there's a question. Verse 32, and the spirit of the prophets are subject to the prophets. Verse 33, for God is not a God of disorder, but of peace. Period. New paragraph. And then the verse is split. This is the New Revised Standard. As in all the churches of the saints, women should be silent in the churches. So if you read it this way, it's saying that God is not a God of disorder, but of peace. That's the end of that thought now. And that's what this little marker here is. New paragraph. What's true in all the churches of the saints is that women should be silent. That's how it reads that way. But if you look at the NIV, it says, for the spirit of the prophet is subject to the control of the prophets. Verse 33, for God is not a God of disorder, but of peace, as in all the congregations of the Lord's people. New paragraph, women should remain silent in the churches. So what difference does this make? Well, if you read the New Revised Standard or something that breaks it after the word not of disorder, but of peace, then what it's saying is the thing that's true in all the churches is that women should be silent. But if you break the paragraph after verse 33, then what it's saying is true of all the congregations of the Lord's people, is that God is not a God of disorder, but of order. That's what's true in all the churches, is order, not disorder, in all the churches of the saints. Whereas in the New Revised, it's what is not true, or what is true in all the churches is that women should be silent. So this is a case, we do this in Bible for the Rest of Us, where it makes a big difference how you break up the verse punctuation wise. And remember, punctuation, there's no punctuation in the Greek text. There weren't even spaces between the words in most of the oldest manuscripts. So there are times where it really does make a difference. All these marks you see in the Greek text, like this bracket, this parentheses, that's put by later editors. The original manuscripts had none of that. It was just straight text. So that's one point that I wanted to make about the 1 Corinthians passage. And then the point to make about the Timothy passage, let me jump there real quick. 1 Timothy chapter 2. So here we go. 1 Timothy 2:12 is, there's question about, I do not permit a woman to teach, and New Revised Standard says, or have authority over, and the NIV says assume authority over. You can see on the screen, this is just one verb. This verb right here, althein, is translated as either to have authority over, which is how some translations have it, or to assume authority over. This word althein is only found one time. It's what's called a hapax legomenon. This is the only time this word is found in the Bible. And so it is very much a question of, what does this verb mean and how is it used elsewhere in other places? And there's a legitimate question about, does it mean to have authority, or does it mean to take authority? Usurp authority might be another way of saying it. And that's where complementarians and egalitarians will disagree. And some will say, no, it's prohibiting women from having any authority. And others will say, well, no, if you look at people like Deborah or Huldah or Priscilla or Junia, they had authority. This is prohibiting women from usurping authority. And that would then tie into what was going on in the churches that Paul was writing to Timothy about. So it really is, so it really is a question of hermeneutics, interpretation, and looking. It's not simple. Unlike, I don't care what Voddie Baucham said in his quote on social media, it's not as simple as that. There is legitimate debate and discussion. And so either side that says it's that simple, they're being dishonest. That may be their conviction, but it's not true. It's not that simple. And even a complementarian like Mike Winger would not have to spend hours and hours and hours on a video if it were that simple. So that's the main point. Wherever you land, Disciple Dojo, we have viewers on all sides of it. Personally, I do not land on the complementarian side. If you want to know why, see my discussion with Carmen.